Behind every undeniable brand are strategies most people never see. Until now. Each week, we're ripping open the playbooks of world-class innovators who've built massive communities from scratch. Real people, real results, real systems you can implement today. I'm Kendall LeJeune, and this is Tribe Tracks. Joining us on the show today is Josh Culler. Josh Culler is the president at Culler Media. He loves learning new things and mentoring others to grow themselves as well. Josh is creative and has self-motivation and drive. He has 10 years of experience in graphic design, photography, videography, and content production. Culler Media offers a variety of media services, including design, branding, social media management, photography, videography, and media consulting. They offer unbeatable prices but still provide the best work possible. Please welcome Josh Culler. Welcome, Josh. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today. How's it going?
Oh, man, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a good conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that are listening and that have never heard of you before, tell us a little bit about what you do. What's your zone of genius?
Yeah, for sure. So I own a marketing agency that specializes in content creation, specifically on the organic side. Dialing it back a few years, I'm not going to go like super deep into my story because I want to make sure we get to some value add questions quickly. If you want to learn more about me, obviously you can go check me out on social media and stuff like that. But I've been in the real estate investing space for 13 years now. Got on right out of high school. It's actually going on 13 years, but it was the end of 2012 into 2013. I got hired by a local wholesaling organization here to run their marketing, which was funny because I was right out of high school, but I had a lot of media experience in high school. That was like what I was very interested in, focused on. And a lot of it was video content. Now, obviously going that far back, it was such a different landscape than what it is today. So the execution of it was slightly different, but the principles of it have always remained the same. That was a wholesaling company, and I ran their marketing for about 6-7 years. Then we had started, while we were part of that organization, we had started a mastermind, and I ended up running that mastermind. And then the company split up. One of the owners that took the mastermind, I worked with him for another 2 years or so. And then I started my agency full time in March of 2019 and been doing that ever since. But I still focus on working with people that are in the real estate investing space. You're in land. I work with a few people that are in land. I work with people that are in real estate investing in some way, shape, or form. It may not just be wholesaling or single family rentals or whatever. But anyway, so that's what I focus in. We do organic social media management, podcast management, YouTube management. And that's pretty much the nutshell of it.
All the things. I love it. I love it. So what gets you most excited about the work that you are doing right now with your agency?
I think the creative side of it, there's so much that like social media goes in these waves, and actually content as a whole goes in these waves. You have some things that like podcasting is not really changed. The biggest change in the last 20 years that has happened with podcasting is the addition to video. That's it. There's really not been much else that's changed with podcasting. If you go back to podcasts early on, and I know people that were doing podcasting back in 2003, 2004, right when podcasting was becoming a thing. And it's just audio conversations, and that was it. There was a lot of like SEO functions too when you published your podcast on your website and that sort of thing. But when we talk about like social media, when we talk about YouTube and that sort of thing, there's a lot of creative development that goes into it. The most previous big wave that has changed the landscape of this is AI. So that's like what we're digging into now, and leveraging AI and many different ways with content creation, that sort of thing. But even as long as I've been in it for the past 10 to 12 years, 13 years, it's changed quite a bit. But again, some of the things that I really love about it is that the principles of it just doesn't change. And we'll end up talking about what that means here at some point. But the creative side of it, developing content, it's a lot of fun. It uses a lot of the creative juices in my head and that sort of thing. So I just love helping people get their brands out there, and that's ultimately what it's leveraged for.
Yeah, I love that. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I really want a brand and I want to create content, but every time they think of the word content creation, they hear or they envision TikTok dances and all this other stuff. Talk to us about how you approach content creation and what is it that you mean? Because I think everyone means something a little bit different, right, when they use those terms.
Yeah, what's funny, right before we started recording this podcast, I'm in a real estate mastermind called Collective Genius.
Mm-hmm.
And I presented to one of the groups literally just an hour ago before we hopped on here to do this recording. And I talked about this specifically because the group that I was talking to, they're beginners in real estate. Most of them are part-time in real estate, but it's one of the beginning groups that Collective Genius has. And I literally frame it the way I explain your question to people even today. I've always explained it the same way over the last 4, 5, 6 years. The way that we should be looking at social media, and let me dial back too. And one of the analogies I gave on that presentation I gave them was, if we were having this conversation even when I first started full-time in the business 5, 6 years ago, when you ever brought up the phrase social media or content, like with real estate investors, like it just eyes glaze over, they just start to shut down, like they don't want anything to do with it. But then if we look over, and that's pre-pandemic, and then now we look over the last 2 years, it seems like everybody's putting out content, everybody's putting out social, everybody has a podcast. There's literally nobody that you possibly can know that doesn't have some sort of content going out in some way, shape, or form. So it's one of those things where people have embraced it. I think it's one of those things where it's become a normal part of marketing strategy, which is great, which is one of my points is when you're doing social media, I think a lot of people tend to try to detach social media or even podcasting or YouTube from their overall marketing, and it becomes its own little silo. And that's not how you treat it. If you are an influencer, like you said, like the dancing TikTok, I even said that on the call. I was like, we're not over here to create dancing TikTok videos. Like, we're here to create content to drive motivated seller leads. And that's primarily what they're going to be using it for. The thing I always dial it back to is I call it the North Star method. What is your North Star? What are you trying to accomplish? You could say it's your goals, it's your KPIs, whatever it is. But if you're trying to develop, for you, if your objective for social or for content is to drive leads for land deals, then all of your content needs to be driven around that. And that means, like, for an active real estate investor, if they're not interested in building a following, they're only interested in bringing leads in, if they're not launching a coaching program or anything like that, there's no purpose for them starting a podcast, because you're not going to have 100,000 subscribers of motivated seller leads coming back to your podcast every single week. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you boil it down to those theoretical thoughts, then it starts to make sense. So the way that we look at organic content, it's all driven around, it's just marketing, and it needs to be infused into your marketing plan in some way, shape, or form. Now, obviously there's differences, right? Like, you're not advertising. There's a difference between advertising and delivering valuable content. You're driving with value. And my definition of content marketing is answering questions that your audience or your demographic, your target demographic, have about what you do, who you are, and your industry. So again, like for me, I'm a social media agency. Any of the content that you see going out on my platforms, it's all, how do you do it? How do you do this? Should you start a podcast? Where to start with your podcast? How many videos should you post a day? How do you develop your content? How do you hire a rock star video editor? There's all these types of topics that are centered around what I do and my industry, my space. And it's all value-based content. That's what I'm putting out. And that content will force people to go try it themselves, come back to me and say, I tried it, but I sucked at it. You know what you're doing. Can you work with me on this? And then that's ultimately how you drive leads from that. It's no different than, again, forgive me if you're not in the real estate investing space, but if you have a coaching program and you're putting podcasts out, teaching people how to invest in real estate, someone will come back to you and say, hey, I tried it myself and I'm just not getting anywhere. Can I just buy into your coaching program so that I can know the 1, 2, 3s of how to get started and get my first deal? That's the process, right? So you drive it as marketing. And I'm, of course, talking about if you are an entrepreneur, business owner, you have a business, I don't care if it's a donut shop. I don't care if you have a gym. You lead with value, and then you're leveraging that content as marketing, and that's the way you do it.
Yeah, that's really good. So many good things in there to unpack. And so I want to get the 30,000 foot view of this particular topic around you just mentioned, doesn't matter what type of business you have, you should have some type of content. Do you think that, are you like of the camp that if you have a business, you should be creating content, you have a brand, you have some type of social presence? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And again, like the volume in which you do it, again, I don't mean to keep harping on it. It's just a prime example that we're sitting on is if you're a real estate wholesaler and your only objective is to drive motivated seller leads, you have no other objective, then you're not going to be putting out 3 or 4 videos a day on your Instagram account for that specifically, right? Like it's important to understand your demographic, who they are, where they hang out, what type of content they're consuming, and that's what you drive off of. But if you can really dial that in, who your demographic is, which that's marketing 101, know your avatar, know your target demographic or whatever, then putting out content in some capacity is highly important for just about every business. And the only reason I say this, and it's to me, sometimes I think that marketers will use the word like credibility or authority as like a cop out to a non or a subjective accomplishment or goal that they're trying to drive to, but you can't really measure authority. You can't really measure credibility. It's really hard to do that. But ultimately, that's what brand building is. It's reputation management. So if I put out tons of videos on content, like I'll put out videos, and I'll give a very prime example for myself. And this one stings just a little bit, but I was putting out a lot of content when I first got going in this space. For me specifically, driving it as marketing. I dialed it back for a couple of years and stopped putting stuff out. And I was very much leveraging masterminds I was part of to bring leads in. And I do have a couple of clients that I guinea pig with where it's like our agreement is I can test things with them. But before I was using my content as a test subject. Now I started to back up, started my podcast back up, started my YouTube channel back up, started up like all my social media content. Now I use myself as the guinea pig for testing because I want to see like pure data. But when I put out content, like I'm in the beginning stages of basically rebuilding my entire strategy. I'll have comments on there of people saying, you're talking about how to do this, but, and I don't have videos out there saying, here's how to get your first 100,000 followers and stuff like that. I'm just talking about like one of the videos I just put out, should you start a podcast? And I have a comment on there, you shouldn't be telling people if they should start a podcast or not, because you don't have any views on your videos. So then I'll reply to that and say, cool, I appreciate that feedback, but I understand that you got to start from ground zero. Plus, I've also developed and built other podcasts that have over a cumulative of 10 million downloads over the course of the last 5 years. So I think I'm good. And I'm only giving value of things that I've actually, I'm not just like preaching things that I don't do. I'm preaching what I practice, right? It's the other way around. So I'm very much focused on that, but that's brand reputation. That's brand management. You're going to get kickback like that from people, but that's okay. And it's all built around you controlling your brand and controlling what the public perceives as your brand. So if you're buying and selling houses, if you have a donut shop and maybe you're putting videos out about the flavor of the day or how you make the donuts, like that kind of stuff controls the narrative of your brand. So you're in control and not other people. And other people can really tarnish your reputation, your brand, by putting out their own user-generated content. But if you're putting stuff out that floods your reputation and helps boost that, then that's a game changer for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, you used the word brand earlier, and I think that word has become a bit of a buzzword in our industry. Can you give us your definition of what is a brand?
It's just reputation. That's all it is. I talked about it in this previous segment, but it's really all brand is its reputation. If I look at, we know the big ones, Apple, Nike, Microsoft, Facebook, stuff like that. But anytime I say any one of those words, there's automatically a thought that comes into somebody's mind, whether it's negative or positive. There's people out there that still today swear that Apple is the devil, right? Like they're just like, I'm never going to switch to an iPhone, never going to get a Mac device or anything like that. I'm in the camp of, I used Android phones for quite some time. And then I just got to a point where I'm like, you know what, the only reason I'm switching to Apple is because everything integrates, and that's my reasoning. So if anybody ever said, Apple, what are your first thoughts? I would say, it's easy to use. Like that, and that's the point. That is the reputation in my mind as a consumer. My opinion on Apple, that's what reputation is. And so that dictates their brand, right? So if you look at any brands that are out there that have gone under or have any kind of negative connotation, whether they were endorsing something that they shouldn't have, or it had a lot of backlash, or even like a really good prime example I like to use is athletes or music artists, right? Like their name is their brand. When you think of Patrick Mahomes, like you'll either like flood people with negative thoughts and they're telling you about how he's not the greatest, like how, and then you have the other camp of all the Chiefs fans think he's like Jesus and he's the second coming and stuff like that. It's no different. And it's no different in like the GOAT debate, right? Like the Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. Those are brands. So the names are the brands. And then they're getting endorsements from Nike, they're getting endorsements from Jordan and all that stuff. But if you literally boil down what brand is, it's just reputation. And that is dictated on every single person's mind that has knowledge of that brand and has had experience with that brand.
Yeah. So if brand is reputation, whether you are intentional about building your reputation or not, is it safe to say that everyone has a brand? Everyone has some type of reputation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you have put out 3 videos a day on social media for the last 6 years, or you've only put out 1 Facebook post in the last 6 years, you have a reputation in some way. And a lot of reputation, older generation, typically, you're not going to find them on social media. There's a handful of people that do. The guy who has been in real estate since the 1970s and has built his empire and really been able to establish his name, he plays by different rules because he's been in the game for so long. So he has a reputation by going to events and by going to networking and masterminds and that sort of thing, and being on radio, being on TV and all that stuff. So could you make the argument of improving his brand? Sure, going on social media, maybe he starts a podcast or whatever, but he's the one dictating his brand. And so he has the ability to say yes or no to those things, but he already has the brand, right? So that's, everybody does have a brand, whether you have put out daily content, whether you have a podcast, whether you don't have a podcast, you have a brand in some way, shape, or form. And that is associated with the reputation in which you're upholding in the person that you come across. Whether that's, and I use this example on that mastermind call I was on an hour ago or so. I said, if nobody knows who you are, that's your fault. The reason you put out content, the reason you put out social media, or you start a podcast, or you do any marketing, PPC, Facebook ads, direct mail, whatever it is so that people know who you are. And you get to dictate with the marketing messaging how you're perceived in the minds of those people. That circles back around to that's your reputation. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned earlier about beginners. So if someone is, let's say they're brand new into this real estate investment space, for example, and they're brand new and they're like, I'm going to have to build some type of brand. I'm going to have to be intentional about what I want my reputation to be out there. What's sort of the framework that you would have them follow if they are looking to build that brand intentionally?
Yeah, I should pull up my presentation from that call that I just did because I literally have this. So I love to keep things simple. I'm the type of person that, like, if you complicate things, for me especially, but I just think it works for everybody. If you complicate things, there's going to be so many areas in which there's going to be holes in your ship and you're going to be leaking water and that sort of thing. So keep things as simple as possible and you improve over time. One of my core values for my organization is innovation. And I preach to my team all the time, keep it simple and we build up over time. And we make sure we have checks and balances between every single improvement that we make to make sure that there's no leaking holes or anything like that. So for me, keeping it simple is very important. So because of that, when it comes to starting, you'll have people, and I said this specifically to the group because most of them are beginners. And I said, if you are the type of person that you're going to get off this call and you're going to go try to hire a full-time videographer to walk around with you for the next 6 months or whatever, then stop what you're doing and do not start there. I think everybody looks at, it's very easy, especially in the real estate space, it's very easy to look at some of the big dogs in our industry or whatever industry you're in and say, this person's doing that, so I need to emulate that. What we don't understand is where they're at, they didn't start there. Like, you should understand that, but you don't in that in the back of your head. But at the same time, we're competitive, we're business owners, we're entrepreneurs, we want things, right? We want to improve, we want to be the best that we can. But a lot of times, starting at this level, they're playing at a different set of rules than what you're playing at. Right? It's JV versus varsity. It's junior high versus varsity. It's junior high versus NBA, right? There's levels between each one and those skill sets, the rules, they're different. So if you start there, you're going to start a podcast and you're like, I need to build out a $20,000 recording studio in my office. That's not the place to start. Start it with opening Riverside or Zoom, and you record it virtually, or maybe you have somebody in your office if you want to that's going to have a camera or whatever. You start from square one. Everybody that's ever started a podcast or started social media or started YouTube, wrote a book, they started with that first piece that they created. And you get better over time. This is the rule of entrepreneurship of business. You start somewhere, you do the right actions, you do the right fundamentals, and of course you're trying to be the best that you possibly can. You want to give effort, you want to commit to it, but you get better over time. But you can't start at the very tippy top and think that's going to get you. Like, you wouldn't believe the amount of offices I've walked into where they had a pile of camera gear worth $10,000 still in boxes. And I asked them, how long has that been there? And we got it last year sometime. We just never opened it. It's because they don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
And it's complex. It's complicated. So if you don't know how to use a piece of equipment, or you don't have somebody that can run that for you, you're just not going to do it. So it's the same thing. I gave the example of not hiring a full-time videographer to walk around with you because you don't know what it takes to create content at that kind of level. You need to start with what you're doing now and put out a couple videos a week and then build up over time on that. Because what happens is, in this space, it sounds so stupid simple that it's almost like we can overlook this a lot of times and discount it and say, okay, whatever. But consistency over a long period of time is the game.
Yeah.
And then of course
not the sexy answer everyone wants, but
it's not. And people want to overlook it, but you get better over time, right? Consistently getting better over time, but you stay in the game consistently. There's a funny statistic out there that Libsyn is one of the biggest podcast hosting websites out there. And they had a statistic, I think it was a year ago, that they said out of all the podcasts that get started, and there was a speaking engagement that I was listening to with one of the VPs of Libsyn. And he said, literally, this is the analytics that we look at. If 100 podcasts are started today, if we wind the clocks up to next year on this same day, 98 of those podcasts won't even exist anymore.
Wow.
So literally just by staying consistent for 1 year, you've now put yourself in the top 1 or 2% of podcasters. Now, obviously, like analytics and that kind of stuff matters, but just staying consistent over that long period of time puts you in that tier. And so you just got to start. Just record that first piece of content, record that first podcast, record that first video, put it out there and ignore it. Don't, like, if you get comments, cool, reply to them. But just know you're doing the actions consistently. That's where you start and you get better over time. That's it. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah, that's really good. Keep it simple. Fundamentals are fundamentals for a reason. So you mentioned podcasts and you gave the really impressive 10 million downloads statistic about the podcasts that you've worked with. Let's dive into podcast a little bit. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see podcasters make that's outside of being consistent, right? So let's say they have stuck with it for a year and they're trying to grow the podcast. What are some of the mistakes that you see people make when they're trying to grow that in that particular phase?
Yeah. So it's good that you said outside of that, because that would be the number one thing, is that they just don't stay consistent with it, right? Like they don't record content consistently. They don't stay ahead. Or one of the biggest things is they will be all like up in arms and ready to go and fired up to start the podcast. They do it for 4 or 6 months and then they stop because it's not getting results. Like, they know what results are, right?
Right.
You just started. You're in the baby stages of podcasting. So it's important to make sure that you have expectations set for yourself. I would say from the start, don't set analytical expectations. Don't say, I'm going to get this amount of downloads, I'm going to get this amount of subscribers. Don't start there. And I know it's like against the grain from what most marketers would teach, and that's cool. Now, there are methods to be able to launch a podcast and get it ranked in the top 1 or 2 podcasts on Apple Podcasts within the first 30 days or whatever. There's methods for that, right? That's cool. It costs a lot of money and costs a lot of time to do that, right? So we're going to pretend that you don't have that you don't have the time capital, you don't have the money capital to be able to, allocate towards that. That's good. If you're just starting a podcast and you're getting going, commit to an amount of episodes, maybe 100 episodes, and say, I'm going to do this many. And then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And then measure what you're doing along the way. The next most important thing that I think that most people miss out on is not knowing what they're doing it for. So I talked about the North Star. That's a big thing that a lot of people miss. Like I've talked to so many people that like they're wanting to start a podcast and they end up on a phone call with me and I say, "What are you starting the podcast for? Tell me what it's about." "Oh, it's a passion project and it's something I've just always wanted to do." And passion projects are beautiful. I think they're great intentionally. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. But at the end of the day, remember, it's going to be a time commitment for you. It's going to be a money commitment. Like, I'm guessing you're not going to be the one that's editing the podcast. I'm guessing you're not the one that's going to be writing show notes for it, designing graphics, putting out the video, putting out the audio, then promoting it. You're probably not going to be that person, right? So understanding that there is commitments to this is important. And just it being a non-marketing essential, that's why I always loop back to this should be marketing. That's important to understand. So if you're not going to be doing it for it's driving towards a product or a service or something that you're trying to, sell people into at some point, then it's going to be really hard for you to justify 6 months in to continue to do it. So know why you're doing it is that's a big step that a lot of people miss. And it seems very obvious, but you'd be shocked at how many people I know that have podcasts. And I'm about to work with a guy starting next month. And I'm sure he's fine with me talking about this. I'm not going to name him by name, but I'm going to be working with him soon. He just reached 100 episodes on his podcast. And he's just now having the conversation of, he's saying to me, I'm a big action taker. So I just know I wanted to put 100 episodes out. And then after that, I want to figure out what I'm doing it for. So he's put 100 episodes out and he's not really sure why he's doing it. So he's now having a conversation, which is great. Like, beautiful. You're having that conversation now, but he just wanted to put out episodes. And that's fine and dandy. But at some point, you got to be thinking, like, where's this headed?
Yeah, beginning with the end in mind. That's really interesting.
Yep.
So at what point do analytics start to play a role when you're looking at, okay, I've done X number of episodes, maybe I've been in this 6, 8, 12 months. At what point do analytics start to play a role? And what do you like to see in those analytics?
Analytics do matter. So obviously, like I use the term vanity metrics, and you're looking at that kind of those statistics on social media, it'd be like video views or followers, stuff like that. But analytics do matter from the start, but most people just don't know how to look at analytics from the right scope. So that's why I typically tell people, stay away from looking at analytics right now. Just put content out. Just do the right things. I would say once you're about 3 months in, or let's just say specifically podcasts, once you're about 25 episodes in, then you can start looking at analytics and looking at how to make the determinations of what works, what doesn't. Some of the things I look at, obviously, podcasting is pretty straightforward. You're looking at like downloads, where the downloads are coming from, if you're sending people to Apple Podcasts versus your website versus the YouTube channel, like stuff like that matters. If you do have a podcast, you should be sending people to a funnel of some sorts. So I'm looking at backlinking too. If I'm sending people to a free plus shipping book offer funnel or something like that, like I want to make sure I have a very specific link and I'm tracking that to see what kind of conversions are coming through. I think that's something a lot of people miss out on. So that's podcasting. And honestly, it's pretty straightforward. There's not really much else to it. If you have low numbers in a specific topic, then don't do that topic anymore. If you have high numbers in a very specific topic, do more of it. YouTube, you can get a little bit more specific, which I love YouTube for the analytics portion of it, especially like if you are going to be doing podcasting, you can see a little bit more factual data. YouTube, I'm looking at retention rates, click-through rates, drop-off points. So retention rates are basically like, if I put out a 30-minute video, that's a podcast video on YouTube, what percentage of my audience made it all the way through the video? What percentage dropped off? Typically, like a normal YouTube video, you're going to have a hockey stick or there's going to be a slope at the beginning because a lot of people are going to be clicking on it. Depending on what you titled it as, your thumbnails to get the click-throughs, there's going to be a little bit of drop off. Now, if it's like a sheer drop off, that's where it's dangerous because you're not going to get any kind of organic views because the algorithm's going to basically tell YouTube nobody's interested in this content, right? So don't do any more of that. If it's a steady slope, you will have a slope, but if it's a steady slope, then, hey, I need to do more of that. There's one client that we work with that he does a lot of education program, but does a lot of different things in real estate, but never fails. Whenever we put out content specifically about creative finance, it always drives the numbers through the roof. So we're constantly trying to evolve the content to talk about creative finance in some way, shape, or form. and it keeps a steady flow and rhythm of the analytics coming through. I would say just as you keep going in your content journey, whether it's podcasting, YouTube, social media, keep an eye on the analytics. Don't let it be the driver of your results. It will tell a story, right? Now, if you are an influencer and you're interested in subscribers and video views, then sure. But if you're interested in driving leads, I'd be looking at making sure I keep an eye on the funnel from where the leads are coming from YouTube into my funnel or from Instagram into my funnel. Those are the kind of metrics I'm looking at. But keep an eye on those from the start, and then just make sure that you have a good mindset of what I actually want to dictate to like my business, right? What is my North Star? Where is it driving me? Because I think a lot of people will put out a video and get 40 or 50 views, and then they're like, man, this sucks. Like, this doesn't do anything for me. And then they quit.
Right.
After a week of putting videos out. And it's, dude, nothing was ever started like overnight that was significant, right? Like, you got to start somewhere. And obviously use those metrics to help fuel your strategy, but it should never let it stop your strategy. Because people get hurt over it. Oh, no, only 40 people liked my video, right? Like, for you, you're the first of millions, right? So it's important to keep your mindset right when it comes to this kind of stuff. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. I want to back up a little bit and drill down into something that you mentioned about you strongly suggest that podcasts should have be connected to some type of funnel. So can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that and what would that look like?
So again, like we're going in the principle of leveraging content as a marketing piece. It's just a marketing piece. That's it. It's just framed a little bit differently than a direct mail piece or a Facebook ad. It's value driven. I'll give you a perfect example. On my podcast, I have a podcast called the REI Marketing Weekly. So if you're in real estate and you're interested in marketing, my podcast is specifically about marketing for real estate investors. So in the middle of my podcast, obviously I own a marketing agency that does podcast production, and my target demographic is real estate investors. And a big part of my demographic are people that are starting a podcast. They're interested in starting one. Maybe I have a few clients where they had a podcast going and then we took it over and now we're managing it for them. But a lot of the clients that I work with have started a podcast. They're wanting to launch one. So smack dab in the middle of my podcast episodes, every single episode I put out, there's a little ad roll that's inside of that. That's about 35 seconds, I think, of me hopping on and say, hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. This is free content. Like, obviously you get to listen to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to. But if you're a real estate investor and you're starting a podcast and you're interested in getting it going with no hassle, easy, then make sure you use, I think I have a landing page that people can go to. I swap in the call to actions every once in a while and have them email me directly. That seems to work sometimes. Some sort of call to action that drops them into a bucket for me where I can capture their information because they're interested in working with me. And then I'll say, now back to the episode. And then I'll finish the episode out. So it's a mid-roll ad. It's no different than a commercial during a football game. At halftime, you're going to have commercials, and it's no different. It's the same thing as that. So making sure that you have some sort of service or product that you're driving people towards. You could have it people use it as a pre-roll ad, right? Like Joe Rogan's notorious for having 20 ads at the beginning of every episode. Again, he plays at a different level though. He's at the number one podcaster in the world. He has a different set of rules, right?
Yeah.
People just know if they're not interested in listening to those commercials, they can fast forward all the way like 10 minutes into the episode. But he plays at a different set of rules. So I'm not saying that you just do that, but if you have somewhere in there, people at some point will have the conversation, Kendall, about monetization. This is the number one way to monetize your content is by selling your own stuff, like selling your own services and your own goods and your own products and what you're doing. Fuse that into your content strategy, and that's how you leverage it. And then you're just tracking that with a link, right? If you have a book funnel that's like realestateinvestorbook.com/podcast, plug that, tell people the call to action is like, if you're interested in this, make sure you go to realestateinvestorbook.com/podcast and you'll be able to get it there. And then you can track how many people went there because it was specifically from the podcast. So that's the way you look at it, but don't overcomplicate it. Make it simple. Make it the easier it is for someone to come from your podcast into your funnel. That's the anthem that you're going to want to follow.
Yeah, that is so good. That is so good. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, I am brand new to the idea of funnels, what tech do you use to track the number of clicks on websites and things like that?
So I told you before we were recording that if there's something I'm not familiar with, that I would tell you.
Yeah.
I am familiar with it, but I'm not an expert in funnel building. There's other people out there, right?
Yeah.
But from a content perspective, whatever CRM that you use or web builder that you use, if you're using Infusionsoft, or you're using any other kind of click through, or whatever else that you're using, school, if you're using something simple like Teachable or whatever you're using, just make sure there's a clear line of sight from the content piece to the conversion. If it's not clear, if it's complex, some funnels are notorious for, if you send people through the first step coming from an Instagram post to your funnel and they have 20 questions, nobody's going to fill that out. And then you're going to miss out on all their information. The name of the game is to get their information. So you're wanting email, phone, name. Those are the basic three that you want. And then you can drive them to the next page. And then that's where they're filling out all the information for you, whatever else that you want. But once you have their information in your CRM, now you can market to them however you want. That being said, whatever you use as a project management software or a CRM, set it up, but just set it up very simply. And I know people, you and I are part of a mastermind, and there's people that have 50, 60 steps to a funnel that are crazy. And they've spent years developing these funnels.
Yeah.
Again, don't start there. You're not starting there. You're starting with something simple. Actually, earlier today, I just hopped on a call with a client that we're working with out of Rhode Island. And we were going through setting up an Instagram funnel for them, where they have somebody on their team that was building it out through, I think it was ManyChat. And we basically process mapped it out very simply. So there's going to be a set of keywords that people can comment on the posts, and then it'll automatically send them a direct message with some context. And then there's a few different steps, but it's very simple. It's very easy. And we even tested it live. We went through it, and it was very easy to go through that funnel. So just keep it simple, especially from organic content into your funnel. You can lose so many people if you make it complex. So just, again, keep it simple.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. So talking about some troubleshooting for podcasts, when podcasts start to stall in terms of like downloads, for example, on analytics, what do you typically advise clients to do at that point?
There's a couple of kind of, if something's stalling, I'm first looking at analytics. And it's hard in a way to explain what analytics to look at. There's so much subjectivity to the world of organic content in general, whether it's podcasting, YouTube, or social media. There's so much subjectivity. There could be, like, for instance, there's podcasts that we work with that they were doing extremely well. We started with them, and then for 2 years, they had a really good show running. All the episodes are shot live in person in a studio. And then the guy who was hosting the podcast was leaving the organization. So they brought a new host in. And then we saw numbers doing this the whole time. And all of a sudden, when the new host came in, it started doing this. And we just found out, like, and I didn't really have any dictation on the host or anything like that. They had already predetermined that. And we just decided, we came to the realization that these are two completely different people. Like, one of them was like a Marine, and he was like super like energetic and like to the point. And this other guy was super nice, very soft spoken, just very professional and that sort of thing. And it was just two completely different people. So those are like things that you're looking at. And so like it stalled out. So now we have to basically redevelop an entire strategy for the podcast, because we're almost talking to a whole different demographic. Because it even came down to the type of guests that they were getting on once the transition happened. They were completely different from what was going on before. So there was like a shift, and a lot of this was done without like me being in on the conversation. And so it was hard to recalibrate what the strategy would be. But we saw it happening, and I tried to catch it as quick as possible. So it started to trickle back up, but now we're basically in a rebuild. It's almost like a sports team. I feel like I'm from the Chicagoland area. I feel like the Bears, like we're rebuilding for the last 40 years. And that's really what it comes down to with that kind of thing. So obviously there's some things that you could do to ramp up the downloads. However, to me, the conversation would be, if you're like, one of the things I would say is, if you have low numbers, sometimes it could be because it's not getting discovered. Sometimes it could be that the content sucks. You have to figure that out by looking at the analytics, doing some market testing and really figuring out what is causing the stall out. Because if your content sucks, the last thing that you want to do is drive all of your marketing towards the sucky content. You don't want to do that. Right? Because then it's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a waste of money because you're building out marketing for something that ultimately is dormant and it's not going to move the needle. So first, I'm looking at my content strategy. Is the quality good? Is the length of time okay? The guests that I'm getting on, are they actually delivering value? Because you'll find many podcasts where people get guests on and they have them introduce themselves and they spend 30 minutes on the introduction and then like 10 minutes on value, right? And nobody's interested in that. If I want to learn about you, I'll go to your website. I want value. I'm here to learn. So looking at that kind of stuff is what I would dissect and audit. And I would even have, if you're stalling out, the best tip I can give you, and it's going to be hard for you, but have 4 or 5 people that come in, listen to your podcast and audit it for you. And they don't even have to be professionals in podcasts. I just want normal listeners and have them tell you what's wrong with the podcast. Just say, hey, listen to my podcast and let me know what your feedback is. Positive, negative, any of it. Don't be afraid to hold back. Listen to what they have to say. And you'll find a lot of times those 4 or 5 people will have the same things to comment on. And then you can make adjustments from there. If your content's good, and you get that feedback and they're like, people just aren't seeing it. Like there's not traffic coming to it. Maybe it's a new podcast. Maybe it's something where it's just never got off the ground in terms of the amount of downloads and the engagement we're getting. Then you ramp up your marketing. And a lot of ways you can do that is by using it as content for emails. And if you have an email list, pushing people there, you should be using your email list to drive people to that podcast as a resource, getting yourself on other people's podcasts to promote your podcast. Prime example, I didn't mean to do it, but I talked about my podcast on Kendall's podcast here. So chances are there might be somebody that's listening that's, you know what, I've been looking for a podcast that talks about marketing for real estate investors. Let me go check out Josh's podcast. That kind of stuff will happen. The low-hanging fruit that you see a lot is chopping up those the podcast into social media content. And then you're posting that on your social media to drive people back to your core content. That's another great strategy that works, that we do that a lot for a lot of people that we work with. So those are a couple things to consider, but it's never just surface level. It's always, what's the root cause? Why is my podcast stalling out? That's what I advise you to look for first.
Yeah, that's great gold right there. I'll be definitely going back and taking some notes on that. That's really good. Now, let me ask, you mentioned content strategy, and I know that's a really big word sometimes for a lot of people that are getting into content marketing. Can you just give us the 30,000 foot view of what your definition of content strategy is and how can people start to employ that?
Yeah, I think I think maybe you're realizing, and probably the audience is realizing, how simple I boil things down to. I've just been around for so long to know that the more complex you make things, the more difficult they're going to be and the harder it's going to be to execute things. I just pulled up, I actually have a checklist of what I take when I'm onboarding a client and we're building their strategy for them. I have a checklist literally that I go through. And normally I think marketers in general use the word strategy to make themselves sound smart and make it seem like there's this big pie in the sky, like revolutionary thing that I'm about to give you and take you through in order to create a strategy. And to me, I just boil it down to a few simple things. Like, and most of it's marketing 101. Like, I'm looking at who you're, first of all, this is probably the best way to do it, Kendall, is I'll take you through what my onboarding is when I'm working with a new client.
Love
right?
it.
So they've never put out social before. They're starting with me. We're building a strategy. One of the first things that I go through is I literally have them explain to me their entire business model. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if it takes them 2 hours to explain it to me. I want them to go through every single piece of what their business model is. If they're starting a coaching program or they have an existing coaching program, they have a mastermind, I want them to go through who their audience is, who are they selling to, who are they buying from, what are the other vendors that they work with, the other service providers they work with, what does your revenue look like? I'm not looking at like financial statements, but I want to know like how much money are you bringing in? If you have a coaching program, what do you charge for your coaching program? Because if you charge $100,000 for your coaching program, the last place I'm going to be putting content is TikTok. And if that's your only piece of the funnel. But if you have a free offer or a $99 offer, then cool, we'll put some content on TikTok. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. I want them to very thoroughly explain what they're basically offering, what are they selling, And then we start building the strategy around that. The next part of it, which is infused in this, is I want them to thoroughly explain who their target demographic is. So if they haven't gone through an exercise, I typically take them through a very basic exercise that helps explain who their demographic is. Now, this is marketing 101, right? Who's your target avatar or target demographic? You want to nail that down. And it's not just what are their interests, what are their tendencies, age, profession, stuff like that. That's all, important to understand. But I also want to know, where do they hang out? So again, if I'm a real estate investor that's actively trying to raise capital from accredited investors, chances are those accredited investors aren't hanging out on TikTok. They're probably on LinkedIn. They might be on Facebook. They might be listening to podcasts. They might be on YouTube. But that accredited investor is a little bit more of a high level audience type. So it's important to know where they're hanging out, what type of mediums. Like they're probably reading books. So maybe I develop a book. That's a good funnel piece to them. Instead of, handing them a business card, I'll hand them a book and say, hey, here's a book that I wrote that explains basically what my business model is. Maybe this will help with the trust factor here. And then they read the book and they're like, I'm in love with this model. So there's that kind of stuff that I'm looking for too. Then the next thing I go through after that, now I'm starting to dive into how much content, where we're posting. Are we posting twice a day? Are we posting 4 times a day? Are we putting out a podcast a week? Again, for some demographics, putting out a podcast doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It's just not, it's not where the audience is hanging out. For some people, I'm not putting out on TikTok. For some people, I'm not putting content on LinkedIn. Not starting a YouTube channel, not writing a book. There's these things that we go through just because we know the business model, we know who the demographic is, and we're developing the strategy around those things. Now, these are all things that you should know. If you're in business and you're professional in business, you should know your demographic better than they know themselves. So I try to pull that out of the person I'm working with as thoroughly as possible because I want to get into their brain when it comes to this kind of stuff. So we're establishing all that. And then one of the last things I go through, honestly, it's literally this simple, but one of the last things I go through is expectations and deliverables. What do I want to accomplish? So I'll literally tell the person I'm working with, I'm like, in a perfect world, what do you want out of the working relationship with me? And I would ask yourself that, even if you're not going to work with me, even if you're just putting out content on your own, ask yourself that. What do I want out of this podcast? What do I want out of this YouTube channel I'm about to start? What do I want out of this book I'm about to write? Ask that question and go through it as thoroughly as possible and make sure you lay out those expectations. Because if you don't have expectations and you're just putting stuff out because you attended a mastermind and someone told you should put it out, then you're going to stop 4 or 6 months in because it's not generating results.
Yeah.
So those are the things I'm looking at. But that's honestly, like, strategy wise, those are the things you go through. Keep it simple. And then you just craft and tweak and critique as you go along. Every week, maybe just do a little bit of improvement. Get better 1% every single day, every single week, get 5% better, whatever your number is. Like, just improve over time. And that's the strategy.
So good. So good. So people that are listening to this that may be new to content creation, what's your approach to how do I know what to create? How do you answer that question?
Man, this is where it starts to get fun for me because there's a couple of really cool tools that I'll geek out on when it comes to this kind of thing. Normally, I would assume the question would be like, what do I talk about on video? Because everybody knows how to whip open their camera on their iPhone and start recording and that sort of thing. Video editors, you can find good video editors many places. And then they can edit on CapCut, they can edit on Premiere Pro, however they're editing videos, and then you publish it, right? Obviously there's a lot more to that, but you, again, get better over time as you do it. But when you are getting going, one of the biggest roadblocks is, where do I shoot video? How many do I shoot? What topics do I go over? And the thing is, again, when I'm going through a strategy, I want to nail down, part of this is nailing down the cadence. So how many videos am I going to be putting out a week? Make it to a point where it's comfortable for you to do and you can sustain it for a long period of time. A lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, it's in our DNA to go balls to the walls and go as hard as we can into anything. Like, it's commitment, like it's do or die. But like when you're getting into this stuff, again, we've already established consistency over a long period of time is the winning formula for when we're getting into organic content. So if you can't stay consistent with a video a day on social media, then don't do that. If you can't stay consistent with 2 podcasts a week, then don't do that. Start with 1. If you get good at that and you're like, man, for 6 months, I've been able to put a podcast a week, I could squeeze in another one. then add another one. But you go along with it as you're building it out and commit to it. So as you're getting going, that's like figure that out. Now, video topics wise, this is probably the next biggest roadblock for people because they're like, I don't even know what to talk about. Or maybe their business is so simple that they're like, I'm going to talk about the same thing like 1,000 times over every single week or every single month. And I'm never going to have new things to talk about. But there's a couple of really cool tricks that you could do. So first thing, this is the number one way I would create your topics. If you're a business, you have customers or you have leads at least. Whatever questions that they're asking, every single question down, that's a video topic. And don't just do one video on that, do multiple. Because you're never going to say the same thing twice. Never going to give the same context twice. You're never going to give the same story twice. Or maybe you're giving case studies. If the question that gets asked to you, you're a real estate investor, and the question gets asked to you from a lead, and they say, what's a cash offer? I'm not familiar with that term. It's jargon, right? I don't know what that is. Do multiple videos on that because you can explain it in multiple different ways. And maybe the one way that you said it on this video clicked with this lead and they understood it and then finally broke through the barrier and you got the deal out of it, right? So do that multiple times. And additionally, like when it comes to that, if you look at any of your favorite influencer, if you really boil down their content, for the most part, there's a 4 to 5 like topics overall that they're talking about. They're just saying it in different ways. Every single video that they put out, whether it's Alex Hormozy, it's Gary Vaynerchuk, or whoever it is. Look at what they're doing, and there's always 4 to 5 topics. And Hormozy is one of those that he talks about so many different things, but they normally come down to a core 4 or 5 principles of what he always discusses. And again, like you should be talking about the things that are in your business. Video topics wise, customers, what are they asking? What are your leads asking? Write that down. The surefire way to never run out of video topics, your best friend is going to be ChatGPT. Okay. So this is obviously like some of you may know where I'm going with this, but this is a ninja trick that a lot of people aren't aware of. So here's the trick. ChatGPT, open it up, and you're going to go to your website, or you could even go to your competitors' websites, copy their URLs, paste it in the chat and say, I need 50 video topics for social media based on the content and my expertise from these websites. Enter, and it's going to rip out all of your content. I did a live demo on this on that mastermind call that I talked to earlier. And I'm like, I need 2 guinea pigs. I need 2 people to send me their websites, and I'm going to do this live. And it spat out topic after topic. And you can name the number. You could do it 100, you could do 1,000. And it's going to spit all that out for you. And then if you find a core like 10 videos that you want to do, then you could say, if you need help, like I'm not the person that I'm going to tell you to script anything. I think that if you have to script, then just don't do it at all. Just talk. Like you get better at talking over time. It's just like anything else. Practice makes perfect. But if you need help with, say, creating bullet points, then tell ChatGPT, say, hey, give me 3 bullet points for every single one of these topics. And then it'll spit those out for you. And then you can craft and critique them however you want. But that's the way you never run out of topics to talk about. So
that's a ninja trick. That's really good. That's really good. So are you using AI in any other ways in content creation and in that process?
So earlier I talked about the biggest wave over the last couple of years in the changes of content has been AI. We're always testing. There's always new things that are coming up. One of the biggest shifts that we have made, and I actually put on my YouTube channel, this isn't a shameless plug, but I just put a video out a couple weeks ago about using AI for video content specifically. We use AI for like copywriting and like quality checking and also typing. So for example, if we have a video, and there's softwares that will do this like CapCut or Office Clip, where you can load a long form video in and it'll automatically search out 5 or 6 clips for you. That does the job generally. But what I say on my video that I put out on my YouTube channel is it does a good job of finding, but you still need human eyeballs to go in and make sure that it's contextual. Because the problem that you'll find with AI right now, and we're recording this, sorry if you're timestamping this, but we're recording this on December 3rd, 2024. And the only reason I'm saying this is because this could change next week. It could change a month from now. It could change a year from now. But as of right now, AI is not to the point where I can just let it go on its own and then it's going to give me the content I want. I think it'll get there at some point. But for right now, it does a good job of clipping out good clips. But I still want my editor going in. And the editors that I have on my team, they're the ones that are pulling the clips. So I don't have somebody that's time stamping for them. I want them pulling the clips. They're knowledgeable in the industry and that sort of thing. There's a whole process with that. But AI does a good job of getting us some clips, and then we'll edit it, make it contextual. Some of the core things that I always look for in video, and this could go on a whole nother topic trail, but one of the reasons why I don't trust AI right now is the 3 things that I focus on with video editing for social media specifically is you have to start with a strong hook. You have to get to the point quickly, deliver value all the way through the video. And then if you want to add a 4th one, call to action at the end, right? AI does a good job of finding a good clip sometimes, but it very rarely holds all 3 of those values when I'm editing video. Very rarely does it start with a good hook. Very rarely does it get to the point quickly. Very rarely does it. And it's not like it's reframing anything that I said in my video that it chopped up, but it just didn't pull the clip correctly. So now I'm relying on my editor to go in to basically piece it together the way that it needs to be pieced together. Starting with a strong hook, getting to the point quickly, delivering value the whole way, adding a call to action at the end. So I think that it's getting there. One neat trick, again, you could do with ChatGPT is transcribe your video. If you don't use like CapCut or Office Clip or anything like that, transcribe your video, throw it in ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, I need 10 clips from this that are value driven, and start with a good hook. We have some prompts that are canned for our team to plug into ChatGPT, and then it'll timestamp some good clips for us to go in and clip out. And then we edit it, make it engaging, add captions, add B-roll, sound effects, all that good stuff. I think the thing we use it for the most right now, Kendall, is probably copywriting. We use it a lot for copywriting, so like show note writing, description writing, hashtagging, stuff like that. Like we do rely on that. We don't only rely on it because we also want it to be SEO driven. So we're still like running it through our SEO systems, but it does a really good job of heavy lifting.
Yeah, those are really good insights. I love that. That.
The last thing I'll point out,
I
actually just recorded a video on this that's going to go out on I keep plugging my YouTube channel, but it's literally,
I can't wait to go look at your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I just recorded this yesterday about how we're using AI for graphic design, primarily for YouTube thumbnails. And it's mind blowing what it can do. Like a lot of the prompting that you want it to do, like obviously thumbnails are meant to drive the click through, right? It's to catch the eyeball and say, hey, I'm stopping on this video to watch this one, right? Because it explains the story on the thumbnail of what I'm looking for. And you can get really creative with ChatGPT. The power of ChatGPT or any AI system is how you use it. It's just a tool right now, right? It's not doing the thing. It's a tool to get the thing done. So we leverage ChatGPT. Like we designed a thumbnail this morning. So one of our clients is putting out a podcast episode that we're putting on YouTube, and they have this system called the 3 payday system. So there's 3 paydays that you can do with a creative finance deal. And I was like, man, I want the thumbnail to have 3 buckets with cash in it, but like little houses on like in front of the buckets. And then it says day 1, day 3, or it says payday 1, payday 2, payday 3. And I dictated that and told ChatGPT to illustrate that for me in a graphic, and it spat it out exactly the way I wanted it. It was beautiful. You would not be like the amount of time it would have taken me or my graphic designer to design that graphic. ChatGPT, it would have taken us probably an hour to design a graphic like that. ChatGPT did it in 20 seconds.
So good. Yeah,
it's crazy.
I love that. And I see you talked about how one of your favorite things about the work that you do is that creative side of it. So talk to us a little bit more about that. Like, where does your creative genius, like where does the rubber really meet the road on that? Is it in the scripting? Is it in the editing of the videos? What is it that lights you up about the actual process of all of that?
That's a good question. So I don't get asked this a lot, but I'm aware of this sort of thing. And it's not an egotistical thing in any way, but I've always been a very good problem solver and very resourceful. Like in my family or my friends group, I'm always the person that someone comes to if their thermostat's not working or their camera's not working or their Alexa's not working, like and stuff like that, because I can figure it out very easily. And it's almost like a hobby of mine to figure it out. Like I literally, my wife has a Jeep Wrangler, and we had to change tires on it for the first time because the tires were like, they're amazing tires. So we had to change tires on it for the first time. Living up north, like you have to normally change tires very often. So I do it on my car, but I'd never done it on the Jeep. I watched a 30-second YouTube short video on how to do it, and I knocked it out. I look like a hero. Like I came in, my wife,
love it.
So like that's part of the creativity side of it is I didn't have anybody teach me how to use ChatGPT to design thumbnail graphics for YouTube. I discovered that on my own. And it's not something that I'm like wearing a badge of honor for, but I'm like, you know what? If ChatGPT could do this, it could probably do this too. And another really cool thing, like I have a tattoo appointment in a couple weeks, and I had ChatGPT design a tattoo for my shoulder. And I even a few months ago, my wife. So long story short, this is a fun story. I'm allergic to two things: bee stings and strawberry seeds. So my wife's, I really, just for fun, I want a tattoo of a bee with a strawberry. And so we went to ChatGPT, had it designed. Dude, it was, I'd have to show it to you. I'll send you a picture after
I have
this.
to see this. I have to.
It's amazing. The way it spat it out, it did exactly what we wanted it to do. And then we sent it to my tattoo artist. My tattoo artist was like, wow, the only job I'm going to have in the future is actually not designing the tattoo. It's actually just like stenciling it. That's it.
Right. Wow.
So it's stuff like that. I love problem solving. I love figuring things out, solutions, and using my creative juices to actually get things done. Because sometimes I'll get things done in a much quicker fashion than some people would, because I was able to problem solve a little bit more. And so even in my business, we always joke about CEOs being like firefighters in their business. And that's what I am. But I also look at it as I'm the problem solver in my business. I don't want everything to rely on me. I want my team members to try to figure things out. But I also am here if you need help problem solving, right? So that's where, like, the content side of it, when I'm looking at analytics, if I'm looking at a certain number that it's telling me, it's hard for me to translate over to somebody that's not familiar with analytics or social media. Here's what to look at, but I just know. I know, okay, this number told me this, so we need to make an adjustment this way.
Yeah. So would you consider problem solving and be your superpower, or?
Yeah, I think so. Resourcefulness and problem solving. Again, like if we ever go on vacations or stuff like that, we went to New York City with my parents. They'd never been before. And I'd only been for the first time last year, and we loved it. It's one of our favorite cities in the world. And I designed this whole like agenda for us, and my parents just let us. They didn't know what we were doing when we landed at the airport. It's just one of those things that I'm a sick person when it comes to that. I love it.
No, that's so good. So do you have any like favorite influencers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs that you like to follow?
So I'm not as much into it as I used to be. I used to read multiple books a week and listen to all kinds of podcasts. And I got to a point where I was younger, and I got to a point where I was just having shiny object syndrome, and I could never focus on anything. So I decided to dial it back. I'll read one book a quarter, study it, make sure it's very relevant to what I'm doing in my business, what my needs are. If I'm listening to a podcast, it's very intentional. If I'm going to a mastermind, it's very intentional, stuff like that. So that kind of dialed me back from like influencers and authors and stuff like that. But I will say one name that this name comes up for a lot of people, but like Gary Vaynerchuk is somebody that I followed since I was very young. And to be honest with you, my business was birthed from his concept of chopping up content.
Wow.
Like I wouldn't have a business if I didn't have a conceptual idea of the way that he ran his content strategy. It's literally what I built my entire business and my entire model off of. And I've critiqued it and made it specific to my demographic and myself as well along the way. However, for him, and I would say I probably agree with about 80 to 90% of what comes out of his mouth. I don't really believe in the hustle like mentality. I believe that hustle's for a season, and I'm in that season right now where I'm in a hustle season. But it's a point where I know I need to work, but I'm not living for the hustle. Like I'm living to build something that's going to sustain and last and that sort of thing. So I'm not looking to drive myself in the ground and sleep for 3 hours a night. It's not that kind of thing. Just concepts of empathy and kindness and that sort of thing. Those are values I've always upheld. And I got that from my parents, and him preaching it and that sort of thing is very near and dear to me.
Yeah. Love that. If you could go back and tell yourself 3 pieces of advice when you first started your agency in this journey of content creation and content strategy, what would they be?
The only thing I would say, and normally whenever anybody like asks a question, if you could go back, like my normal reaction is I wouldn't change a thing. Like, because I'm a Christian, I believe in God, and I believe that everything that we do in life is dictated by God's will and where he wants us to go and that sort of thing. But when it comes to that specific question, the only thing I would say is always evolve, like always innovate. There's been seasons in my business where I got stagnant and and everybody goes through this. Everybody does. Where like I wasn't improving, I wasn't getting better, and then things started to slide. And in like my business, I don't know about like your business or anybody else's, but in my business specifically, a lot, and this happens for a lot of service-based businesses, when negative things happen, we don't feel the repercussions of that until a quarter later. So if like I lose clients, I don't feel the repercussions of that until the next quarter.
Right.
So when the income's not coming in. So that kind of stuff happens. So I'll get into a season where I'm like just coasting or whatever. And it's not on purpose, but then I'll like, oh, I got to snap out of it, get my headspace, and then jump back in. And then I'm fighting. I'm in the corner fighting and that sort of thing. That kind of stuff happens. So I would go back and always tell myself, always innovate, always get better. My motto is 1% better every single day. I tell my team that all the time, and just always improve.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I want to thank you so much, Josh, for just giving so much and being so generous with your time and with your knowledge. How can we give back to you? What connections or resources are you currently looking for?
If you are somebody that is interested in working with an agency that's well-rounded and has been around for quite some time and worked with some very reputable people on your organic social media, podcasting, YouTube, send me a message, reach out to me. I'm on social media. You can find me, Josh Culler, or you can email me, josh@cullermedia.com. Culler spelled Culler. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody. I'm also the type of person that, like, if you do message me and you want to get on a call, don't be nervous about getting on a call with me. I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm just gonna ask you questions. Hey, what do you need help with? Tell me about your business. What do you need help with? And then there's been calls, Kendall, where I get on with people and I literally unload a bunch of information from them and I never hear from them again. I'm okay with that. So if I could ever help in any way, maybe you have questions about content, social media, podcast, YouTube, or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out, ask me. And then, of course, I've mentioned it. I have a podcast, REI Marketing Weekly. I have a YouTube channel, putting out social media content on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, that sort of thing. So go follow me there. And there's a lot of what we talked about. I go into more depth on that sort of thing. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll be putting all of those links and all of your handles in the show notes. That way people can easily find you. But this has been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for just sharing all of this information with us. This is really fantastic. We really appreciate it.
Amazing questions. You did such a good job interviewing, man. The podcast is always made by not just the guests, but the questions that are being asked by the interviewers. So you did an amazing job, and I appreciate all the thoughtful questions.
I humbly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for listening. We will catch you in the next one. Until then, take care, be safe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Hey there, brand fan. If these insider strategies on building influence and cultivating real community got your wheels turning, like and subscribe for more conversations that cut through the noise and get to what really works. And if you're ready to turn these insights into action, head over to onlybrandfans.com to unlock the next level. Until next time, build something they can't ignore.